Hello and welcome to Education Views today. Sarah White with you. Thanks for joining me. In an ever-changing world of technology and globalisation, the nation's capacity to sustain a high quality of life for all depends on the ability to compete in the global economy. This means that government bodies are placing more emphasis on civics and citizenship education, also known as CCE, than ever before. So what is the best way to teach civics and citizenship in primary schools in an effort to achieve the Melbourne Declaration's goal that all young Australians should be active and informed citizens? To discuss this further today, I'd like to welcome Kelsey Svensson to the studio. Good morning, Sarah. Thanks for having me. You're precisely right. In 2008, Australia's Ministers of Education released a national framework which aims to shape Australia's future. One of the primary goals of the Melbourne Declaration is to generate active and informed citizens. The incentive behind the first framework of its kind was recognising the role education plays in the prosperity of our country. What does it mean to be an active and informed citizen, Kelsey? There are many aspects that contribute to how one can become an active and informed citizen. Citizenship is about the role people play in the community, including understanding the rights, responsibilities, and privileges that come with being a citizen. Active citizenship goes beyond that and is about participating within society and upholding responsibilities. Much deeper than just voting, but also showing an interest, making a difference, and being a part of the community. Conversely, without civic knowledge and a disposition to engage, a person cannot effectively practice active citizenship. In order to be an informed citizen, you need to not only be involved within these systems, but also capture the ability to evaluate, critique, and take action on injustices when observed. Civics and citizenship education must reflect these definitions to successfully ensure that students are not only participating in active citizenship while at school, but also well into the future. Interesting. Were we not already doing that before the introduction of the Melbourne Declaration? Unfortunately, not to the extent we should have been. Studies have found that the previous pedagogical approaches to CCE were producing more good citizens than active. It was common for young Australians to leave school and become law-abiding citizens and have an understanding of the democratic systems of government and voting, but they were not being involved in the community at a deeper, more critical level. Why do you believe that was the case? Although there may be many reasons as to why there is a lack of active citizens after school, I firmly believe that it was because of the minimal approach to civics and citizenship education that was adopted. This minimal approach was very content-heavy and focused on Australia's federal system of government, democratic processes, social heritage, and judicial systems. Despite this heavy content approach, it had failed to give consideration to other important aspects such as values, behaviours, attitudes, and skills which are associated with citizenship. How has the Australian curriculum changed to balance out this issue? The new approach within the Australian curriculum has incorporated the skills and attitudes for participation in democratic processes, as well as the knowledge necessary for active citizenship. The Civics and Citizenship curriculum area is now compiled of two strands: Knowledge and Understanding, which focuses on government, democracy, laws, citizenship, diversity, and identity, and the second strand, Inquiry and Skills, which focuses on skills of questioning and research, which are analysis, synthesis, and interpretation, problem-solving and decision-making, and communication and reflection. These two strands are intended to be implemented within the classroom through assimilation rather than standalone focus areas. These changes have seen the curriculum transform to be a maximal approach to CCE because they're inclusive, participative, process-led, and value-based. With this new maximal approach to CCE, students will gain the ability to actively and critically think about and act on issues at a local, national, and global level. So, Kelsey, what is the best way to implement this curriculum within the classroom? For teachers today, the implementation of this curriculum into the classroom seems to be one of the main problems. I believe this stems from the misunderstanding of the subject and how to integrate it into the classroom. The ideology that this is a subject where learning is restricted to the classroom could not be further from the truth. The first and foremost step to developing active and informed citizens is that schools adopt a whole school approach to CCE. This involves classroom teaching and learning practices, curriculum and community partnerships, and school programs and policies. In fact, All aspects of the school's ethos should interlink and complement each other. This is to ensure schools adjust aspects of these elements to better cater for socio-cultural needs. In the classroom, teachers need to also understand that CCE skills shouldn't be restricted to this dedicated subject. Rather, use these skills to influence other subject areas within the Australian curriculum. That is very interesting, Kelsey. This topic is very interesting, Sarah, and there is plenty to discuss. One of my favourite things about CCE is the ability to create a participatory approach. Teachers should also work to incorporate democratic approaches in the classroom, where students also have the ability to participate in real-life activities, such as school governance programs, including voting and decision-making. Allowing students to be creators of their environment and learnings will create a disposition to engage. Inquiry-based learning is another approach which can be used at either a collaborative level or individually. Inquiry-based learning encompasses the skills component of the CCE curriculum. This approach to CCE is very hands-on and student-centered. It focuses on the teacher taking the position of scaffolding student learning rather than being the content expert. Teachers allow students to discover their own answers using inquiry skills through asking open-ended questions. Within this approach, you can close the gaps for students between real-life and classroom experiences by incorporating multicultural pedagogies. You mentioned multicultural pedagogies, Kelsey. Can you explain this for our listeners? I sure can, Sarah. The Melbourne Declaration states that to be active citizens, students must respect and appreciate cultural, social, and religious diversity. I believe this was included within the Melbourne Declaration to support the multicultural nation we now live in. It is vital that all students are given a voice within the community, and it is imperative to remember that Australia has not always been accepting of other cultures. It was not that long ago, Sarah, in fact, only in the first half of the 20th century, that the Australian government sought to create a uniform white Australia. This meant that immigrants were pushed to forget their own culture and adopt the new Australian way of life. When teaching values within the classroom, the teacher must ensure they do not push personal or dominant cultural ideals onto the students and teach it in a way that is democratic and respectful of all cultural backgrounds. By adopting the two-way learning principle, which understands that learning occurs differently for students depending on their socio-cultural backgrounds, will provide a good pedagogical basis for teachers. It is likely that migrants still practice traditional language and culture at home. Therefore, we need to be aware and accepting of this so we do not push our dominant Anglo-Saxon culture on them within the education system. Incorporating marginalised perspectives within teaching practices through the use of ICTs or families within the community, we can show our appreciation of culture and give all students a sense of value and belonging within the school. It appears that you have a very good understanding on cultural minorities, but I have to ask, as I'm sure many listeners are wondering, where does the past of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people fit into all of this? I am glad you mentioned that, Sarah, as their past is overwhelmed with stories of historical and cultural marginalisation. It should be known that there has been an unequal power relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people over the last 220 years. As many people already know, right up until the referendum in 1967, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were recognised in our Constitution as flora and fauna. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people suffered for decades because of government policies such as the Assimilation Policy, Aboriginal Protection Act and Integration Policy. These policies allowed marginalisation to occur and resulted in events such as the Stolen Generation. It is vital that teachers recognise these events and that they are not necessarily past experiences, as even today, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are still victims of marginalisation and fight for their rights of citizenship. This provides an opportunity to use real-world context within the classroom and introduces students to events such as the closing of Aboriginal communities and allows them to use the skills of inquiry to critique the situation and compare it to those of the past. Students often depend on their prior knowledge of their world outside the classroom in order to make sense of what is being taught inside the classroom. Therefore, it is extremely important that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students see themselves within what they are learning. The perspectives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples should be taught within the CCE curriculum, even if there are no Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students in the class. That is all we have time for today. Thank you, Kelsey, for joining us for Education Views today. You are most welcome. I just want to leave you with a final thought. Wendy Cott once said, Education is the most powerful tool countries have for boosting economic growth, increasing prosperity, and for giving more just, peaceful, and equitable societies. Where educational deprivation exists, it breeds conflict and enables repression.